object in life was to be Diana. That has always been her passion.
And her idea of elegance is phony to the nth degree.
The obvious reality that my sister wasn't around anymore, and I wanted to speak for her honestly and truly and fully. And that was it, really. That's all I tried to do.
30 years of absolute silence, and then suddenly...
In fact, in the final paragraph, I'd run out of energy and almost out of oxygen. I know it sounds rather overdramatic, but...
One decision detonates across the entire royal world, like a hidden truth finally forced into daylight. No interview, no memoir, no leaks, no quiet background briefings, just a single refusal.
A home of some sort in order to get better. I was almost an embarrassment.
That echoed louder than any confession ever could. Because when a man like Charles Spencer, the 9th Earl Spencer, breaks a 30-year pattern of saying nothing, it doesn't register as a choice, it registers as a warning. And the timing of that warning, the people it targeted, and the history it dragged back into the spotlight, that's where the story stops being about memory and starts becoming about control. For 3 decades, the world dissected Diana, dramatized Diana, monetized Diana, turned her into something that could be packaged, streamed, and sold endlessly, while the one man who knew the private version of her, the version no camera ever captured, stood behind a locked gate in Northamptonshire and refused to participate. That silence wasn't passive. It was deliberate. It was discipline. It was protection. And then a courier arrived at Althorp carrying a proposal that didn't just ask for access, it demanded everything. Diaries, footage, land, legacy, and the answer came back instantly. Cold, final, and unmovable? No. No negotiation. No compromise. No conversation. That single word didn't just shut down a deal, it split the narrative in two. On one side, a global media machine that had already learned how to turn Diana's story into content. On the other, the last blood guardian of that story, drawing a line so sharp, it exposed everything that had been quietly building behind the scenes. And the people caught directly in that line weren't sitting in Buckingham Palace, they were in Montecito, watching a rescue plan collapse before it even reached the runway. Because this wasn't just about a documentary. It was about ownership, about who controls Diana's past and who gets to shape her future. To understand why that refusal hit like a thunderclap, you have to go back to the moment that defined Charles Spencer in the public eye. September 6th, 1997. Westminster Abbey. 2 billion people watching. A young man standing at a lectern, speaking directly into the heart of the institution that had just lost the woman he was there to bury. He didn't speak like a courtier. He didn't soften his words. He made a promise clear, direct, and dangerously public that Diana's sons would never be swallowed by the same system that had consumed her. And then, he disappeared. That disappearance wasn't weakness. It was strategy. Because while the world built an entire industry around Diana's image magazines, documentaries, streaming deals, commemorative products, Charles Spencer did something almost unheard of in modern celebrity culture. He locked the archive. No diaries released. No home movies sold. No private photographs licensed. The real Diana, the one who wasn't curated for headlines, remained completely inaccessible. And that made him the most powerful gatekeeper in this entire story. Because what sat inside Althorp wasn't just memorabilia. It was the version of Diana the world had never seen. The unfiltered reality. The moments that weren't designed for public sympathy or narrative framing. And for 30 years, every offer, no matter how large, how persuasive, how strategically packaged, was rejected. Which raises the question that started echoing the moment that Courier left Althorp. What changed? Because the proposal that triggered that refusal wasn't random. It didn't come out of nowhere. It followed a pattern that had been building quietly, step by step, detail by detail, right in front of the cameras. It started with something small, almost invisible. May 2018, the royal wedding. Meghan Markle stepping into the evening reception wearing Diana's aquamarine ring. At first glance, it looked like tribute, respect, a connection across generations. But then it didn't stop. Earrings appeared. then the Cartier watch, then the bracelets, each piece carefully placed at moments where the cameras were guaranteed. And that's where the pattern begins to shift. Because one appearance is memory, two appearances is sentiment. But repeated appearances, precisely timed for maximum exposure, start to look like something else entirely. Not proof, not confirmation, but enough to raise a question, the kind of question Charles Spencer doesn't ignore. From Althorp, he wasn't seeing isolated gestures. He was seeing a sequence. A sequence where pieces of Diana's story were being repositioned, reframed, and inserted into a completely different narrative without any involvement from the one person who controlled the original archive. And that absence, the lack of a single conversation, a single consultation, started to matter more than the appearances themselves. Because those items weren't just jewelry. They were fragments of identity. Physical connections to specific moments in Diana's life. And when those fragments begin appearing in carefully managed public imagery, aligned with announcements, interviews, and brand-building moments, the interpretation shifts. Not from grief, but toward strategy. And then came March 2021. The Oprah interview. A global audience. A controlled environment. A narrative built around isolation, institutional failure, and emotional survival. And for anyone who knew royal history, the structure felt familiar. Not identical, but unmistakably parallel, because the blueprint had already been written in 1995. Diana, Panorama, Martin Bashir. A royal woman describing isolation inside the institution, speaking directly to the public because internal channels had failed. The emotional architecture was almost identical, but one detail changed everything. Diana gave that interview while she was still inside the system. No exit. No safety net. No alternative platform. The 2021 version happened after the exit. From California, with production already in motion. And from Althorp, that difference wasn't subtle. Because for Charles Spencer, that moment didn't exist in isolation. It connected directly to something much deeper, something far more personal. A secret that reshaped how he viewed every public retelling of Diana's story. Martin Bashir didn't reach Diana alone. Charles Spencer introduced him. He believed he was helping. He believed the documents he was shown, bank statements suggesting betrayal within Diana's inner circle, were real. But they weren't. They were forgeries. Fabricated evidence designed to manipulate trust, create paranoia, and push Diana toward that interview. And decades later, a formal inquiry confirmed it. Which means the most defining media moment of Diana's life, the moment that exposed her vulnerability to the world, happened because a door was opened under false pretenses. And that door was opened by her own brother. That realization doesn't just stay in the past. It reshapes everything that comes after it. Because from that moment forward, every decision Charles Spencer made wasn't just about protection. It was about correction. About ensuring that nothing remotely similar could ever happen again. The archive stayed sealed, the diaries untouched, the footage unseen. Not because of control, because of consequence. And that's exactly why the 2027 proposal crossed a line no previous offer had even approached. It didn't just ask for access. It asked for everything. Althorp itself, the private island where Diana is buried, the diaries she never intended anyone to read, the home videos that captured her unguarded life. And then, layered on top of all of it, one final element that changed the entire meaning of the project. It wanted to draw a direct line between Diana and Meghan Markle. Not symbolically, explicitly, positioning Meghan as the modern continuation of Diana's story. And in that moment, the pattern became complete. The jewelry, the interviews, the narrative parallels, and now the archive itself. Each step building towards something larger. Something that, from Althorp, didn't look like tribute anymore. It looked like transfer. And that's when the answer came. Immediate, absolute, final, no. Because for the man who had spent 30 years protecting what the world never saw, this wasn't just another request. It was the one request that, if accepted, would have changed everything. And the silence that followed that refusal wasn't empty anymore. It was loaded. And what it means for what happens next inside Montecito, inside the palace, and inside that locked archive hasn't even begun to fully surface yet. The refusal didn't just close a door at Althorp, it exposed a collapsing structure far away in Montecito, where a media strategy built on proximity to Diana suddenly lost its most valuable access point. Because once that archive was denied, everything that followed had to operate without the one element that could have transformed narrative into authority. And that's where the power shift becomes impossible to ignore. Because look closely at the timing. By the time this proposal was made, the Sussex media operation wasn't standing on momentum, it was standing on diminishing returns. The early success had already peaked. The debut documentary had drawn global attention, but every project that followed carried less impact, less resonance, less urgency. The lifestyle rebrand struggled. The audience response cooled. And suddenly, the one narrative that still held consistent value, the connection to Diana, was no longer expandable. That's not a minor setback. That's a structural problem. Because without the archive, the story doesn't evolve, it repeats. And repetition, in a media environment driven by novelty, becomes risk. The same emotional beats, the same institutional conflict, the same framing of past wounds. Without new material, the narrative begins to circle itself. And the moment it starts circling, it starts losing power. And Charles Spencer understood that before anyone else reacted to it. Because his refusal didn't just block access, it froze the trajectory. It stopped the escalation. It prevented the transition from storytelling into ownership. And that distinction matters more than anything else in this entire situation. Because storytelling can be challenged. Ownership cannot. And that's why this moment quietly shifts influence away from Montecito and back toward the only place that still holds something the world hasn't consumed, Althorp. But here's where the tension deepens. Because the refusal doesn't resolve the conflict, it intensifies it. Because Harry's position doesn't disappear just because access is denied. His connection to Diana isn't symbolic. It's personal. It's lived. It's rooted in memory, not material. And that creates a contradiction no one in this story can fully resolve. Because while Charles Spencer protects the archive, Harry carries the experience. And those two forms of ownership don't align, they compete. And when they compete, the fracture widens. Because now every future decision becomes loaded. Every interview becomes a statement. Every silence becomes a position. Every project becomes a test of legitimacy. And the question that starts forming behind all of it isn't just about content anymore, it's about authority. Who has the right to define Diana's story now? The brother who protected her privacy? Or the son who lived her reality? And the moment that question becomes central, the entire structure around this narrative begins to destabilize. Because there is no answer that doesn't create consequence. If the archive remains closed, the narrative risks stagnation. If it opens, the legacy risks transformation. And right now, neither side is moving. Because Althorp remains locked. Montecito remains active. And the distance between those two positions is no longer just emotional, it's strategic. Which means what happens next won't come from agreement. It will come from pressure. Pressure to adapt. Pressure to pivot. Pressure to find a new direction that doesn't depend on what's no longer available. But here's the part that makes this story feel unfinished. Because it is. Nothing about this situation has reached resolution. The archive is still sealed. The narrative is still evolving. The tensions are still escalating quietly, behind statements, behind appearances, behind carefully controlled public moments. And the most important detail of all, the man who just delivered the loudest message in 30 years still hasn't said a single word, which means the next move won't be announced. It will be revealed. And when it is, it won't just reshape this story. It will decide who controls it.